Hello, kia ora, g'day. I'm Philip Duncan from Weather Watch TV on YouTube with your Australia-only forecast until Sunday. And we've got some storms in the south. The polar airflow keeps coming, but at the same time, the tropical boundary is dropping a lot further south, and we do see more showers forming in the top half of Australia over the next week ahead. Let's try and make sense of everything at the moment and look at this line of convergence today stretching right across Australia. We saw this on the rain maps last week, and we've got rain and showers around parts of Western Australia, South Australia, Victoria, and into Tassie as well. Although around New South Wales, the ACT, you're on the edge of it, so maybe a lot of cloud coming through, not necessarily much in the way of rainfall, but you never know, you might get a downpour as that brushes by, much of it going over Victoria, South Australia, and the southern part of Western Australia. Further to the north, not a lot going on. Look at all the thunderstorms up in the tropics, properly up towards Papua New Guinea and Indonesia. Thunderstorm outbreak continues there, but not really for the northern parts of Australia, apart from a couple of isolated thunderstorms, at least today anyway. So let's make sense of it on the air pressure and temperature map. That line of convergence, very clearly seen. I always get asked by people, what happens when the tropical boundary gets close to the polar one? This is what happens. You end up with this line where the rain is forming. So we've got some low pressure here around Western Australia about to drift into South Australia. That is helping to spark some of that rain that we've got, and a wee bit of unsettled air pressure out to the east around New South Wales. It's like a trough, basically trying to form a low, but not really having much luck to do it. High pressure very nearby, close to Brisbane at the moment. So the hot weather is in the red and the cooler weather is in the green. So you can see it's like the bottom third or the bottom quarter of Australia has been dipped in the cool paint. And so your temperatures are down at the moment in the south. So as we go into Tuesday, that line of wet weather, that small area of low pressure still there, but moving more so into South Australia. Again, a lot of that forming and falling out where nobody really lives, but we do have thunderstorms and some heavy rain tracking along, and it fades out the further you go into more populated areas. Not my fault. That's just the way it is, I'm sorry. And over to the east, that other area around Sydney or north of Sydney, producing a few showers, maybe a few thunderstorms in there as all of this weather tracks eastwards. This line here tracks eastwards. Further down around Tassie, the windy westerlies are back. Your temperatures go up a little bit though as the polar boundary drops entirely south of Australia. And over around, I had a complaint from Margaret River, please stop the wind and the rain. Not quite there yet, sorry. Got a few more showers to contend with. And I was watching the rugby in Western Australia over the weekend, the All Blacks playing the Wallabies. We won't talk about who won. I don't want to upset my Australian viewers. But it was amazing to see how much wet weather you were getting for that game in Western Australia over the weekend. So that is still around the showery southerly, but not as wet as it's been. And in the tropics, pretty quiet, a few thunderstorms just here and there. On Wednesday, pretty dry around Australia with some low pressure in central areas, the red boundary dropping further down. So in Queensland and perhaps the northeast corner of New South Wales, the north to northwesterly winds will be hotter. You'll feel the humidity going up more, but it is dry for the most part. But there may be a couple of showers down around the ACT and on the western side of the ranges of New South Wales and maybe Victoria. Won't be much by the looks of it. The polar boundary comes back up to the southern part of Tasmania thanks to this stormy system to our south, and the next high in the Indian Ocean still not quite moving in, and sort of does on Thursday. It sort of does. It's almost over the top of the southwest corner. Couple of little showers remaining. Otherwise, it is drying out and the wind is easing for many of you in Western Australia. Up in the tropical portion of it, there is a lot of low pressure up here, but it's not producing very much in the way of rain, just a few thunderstorms and showers around the top end, and the far north Queensland also seeing a few showers. But look at the red boundary now, pulled right down basically over Brisbane. So if you live in that southeast corner of Queensland, you will also feel the heat on Thursday. You'll feel it over the next few days ahead, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Temperatures going up to the mid-30s around the coast, maybe mid to late 30s further inland for you. Around New South Wales, there is some low pressure. That's going to spark some showers and thunderstorms, might affect the ACT as well on Thursday. But it's really Tassie and Bass Strait back into the severe weather box as not only very strong winds kick back in again on Thursday, damaging gales are possible, but the polar boundary comes right up and brushes the coastline of Victoria. So you'll feel the temperatures down again in Geelong, in Melbourne, and even right over to about Mount Gambier, all of that area feeling that temperature down. It's not majorly cold, it's just, you know, more of the same. I feel guilty saying that because I know many of you are sick of it. So here is the wind gust map showing Thursday afternoon, 5 o'clock local time in the afternoon. The areas in purple, most of that is out at sea, but as it brushes over the mountains, the ranges, the hills, you could have some damaging gusts getting up to 90 or 100 kilometres an hour around Tassie and Bass Strait as well. Not quite as windy around the coastal parts of Victoria, but it is still a bit windy. And by Friday, the winds shift eastwards. So this box shows two things. One, you've got the severe weather risks around Tasmania, heavy west coast rain and showers, thunderstorms, maybe some hail and squally showers in there, and potentially a light bit of snow higher up at the highest elevation. And then further northwards, while it's not so obvious on this map, there could be a surge of strong westerly winds around the mountains of Victoria, New South Wales, the ACT, just the southern part of it, as that all moves on through. Quite a big storm just south of Australia, and no real high pressure zone over the mainland itself. So we see some showers with thunderstorms in the northeastern corner of New South Wales and the southeast corner of Queensland. The hot tropical weather lingers around. It might just shift northwards a small amount, but not really enough for you to notice. And further up around Queensland and the Northern Territory, the blue you see, isolated thunderstorms. Also, it's worth pointing out, I do get complaints from time to time where people say, you said there were going to be showers and we didn't get anything. The blue on these maps, which you see a lot of, is right at the bottom of the scale, 0.2 millimetres for the pale blue that you see in some of these areas. So 0.2 millimetres, to be angry that that didn't form, is basically not looking at the maps properly. So basically it says in these areas there is a risk of showers, and the darker the blue gets, the higher that risk is because it shows higher rainfall. Once you get into the greens and the yellows and the oranges, that's very heavy rain, or at least piles up a lot more. So for 24 hours to see the pale blue doesn't necessarily mean you've got a giant amount of rain on the way. You might get the big build-ups, but without the rain relief. Here's the second of the wind maps, I should say, 2 o'clock Friday, showing strong gusty conditions through the mountains. This is the one I mentioned before, could come right up to about Sydney, but most of it is around Canberra, further down really into the mountains of Victoria and other hills further to the west as well. So anywhere hilly in Victoria, west to northwest winds on Friday, but it could be Tasmania that is most exposed to the damaging gusts. 120 kilometre an hour gusts are possible at this early stage. Still could change a wee bit a few days out, but that is the wind potential on Friday for the southeast corner of Australia. Going into the weekend now, so we've got a cold change down here around the southeast once more, the polar boundary coming up just north of Melbourne. We've also got thunderstorms and other showers forming in other parts of Australia. And as we jump to Sunday, once more, showers. An outbreak of showers, if you like, and thunderstorms here and there. Some low pressure forming in South Australia or the Northern Territory. It's a little too early to lock it in. Apologies, the wind animation isn't working here, but an easterly breeze or an strong easterly wind coming out of South Australia and into Western Australia coming through here. And southerly winds carrying on for the southern part of South Australia, around Adelaide, for example, and coming into Victoria, where the temperatures are still down under that polar airflow. So it is changing. You know, we're seeing the heat dropping southwards now like we haven't done for a number of months. We're seeing more showers bubble up as well. On the 7-day rainfall map, once again, I repeat, the blue over an entire week, less than 5 millimetres. So you see a lot of blue on the map, may not be very much in the way of rain relief unless you're lucky enough to get a thunderstorm, and that's not always a lucky thing to get. The other thing to mention about the thunderstorms, how dry it's becoming around especially Queensland at the moment. So you've always got the risk with thunderstorms of any kind of bushfire, and I know that there are now some fire restrictions going on around parts of Australia. So a few moving parts, but not necessarily a huge amount of rain for most of Australia. But the west coast of Tasmania, 150 millimetres for some of those areas over the next 7 days. That's all from me. I'll see you again tomorrow, Tuesday, as we fine-tune what I've just talked about today in more detail. I'll see you then.